moved with a silent determination, his boots barely making a sound as he navigated the winding, high-tech hallways of Echelon Dynamics. The building loomed with cold steel walls and glass panels displaying pulsating lights, each one concealing secrets only whispered about. This wasn't a normal mission, this was a race against time, and the stakes were deadly. Dr. John Cross, Ethan's father, the mastermind behind Project Genesis, was waiting for him, a man who had finally decided to sever ties with Echelon's insidious grip. His encrypted message had been brief but desperate, a plea disguised as data. Nathan, hardened from years of peril, was here to answer that call. He slipped into the shadows as two guards passed by, their radios crackling with routine updates, oblivious to the predator lying in wait. As soon as their backs turned, Nathan ghosted forward, slipping into the main lab where Cross had been working. The room was a stark contrast to the rest of the facility, illuminated only by the pale glow of monitors. It had an eerie, deserted quality, as if even the machines feared what they had helped create. There, hunched over a console, hands shaking with the weight of his decision, was Dr. John Cross. Nathan's voice cut through the tense silence. "Dr. Cross." Cross jerked his head up, his eyes wide with surprise, then flickering with a touch of relief. "They sent you?" he whispered, voice laced with disbelief and exhaustion. I wasn't sure anyone would get my message." Nathan crossed the distance quickly, every movement precise, his gaze flicking to the disabled cameras overhead. "Your message reached the right people. But we need to move. This quiet won't last." He reached out, gripping Cross's shoulder for just a moment, grounding him. Cross's eyes darted back to the console, his hesitation clear. "Do you know what's at stake here? Project Genesis, it's not just a project. It has the power to rewrite everything we know, to alter reality itself." His voice cracked, a mixture of desperation and regret. "I thought I could control it, make it a force for good, but Leonard Marshall and the General, they don't want control. They want power. They're willing to burn down everything to get it." Nathan replied, his tone edged with steely resolve. "They've already tried." He saw the turmoil in Cross's eyes and softened his tone just slightly. "You made the right call, Doctor. Now let's get you out before they realize you're gone." Cross hesitated a moment longer, then grabbed a small data drive from his desk, a lifeline containing the uncorrupted research that he couldn't afford to leave behind. "This is everything they'll need if they try to replicate my work. I can't let them have it. Not after everything." Nathan nodded, his eyes hardening as he glanced back toward the door. "Understood. But every second here is a risk. Let's go." They moved in tandem, Nathan taking the lead with a practiced caution, while Cross followed closely, clutching the data drive. Their footsteps were nearly silent as they navigated the sterile hallways, the hum of machinery their only soundtrack. Cross glanced at the gleaming walls, his expression a mixture of regret and quiet resolve. "I didn't do this just for me. I thought, maybe it would make a better world. Maybe my son would live in a world where he didn't have to fear people like Leonard." Nathan's expression softened slightly. "Ethan knows you're doing this. He knows you're trying to make things right, even if he doesn't know all the details." Cross swallowed hard, the weight of those words evident in his haunted gaze. "I only wish he knew how much I've regretted staying here, thinking I could change things from the inside. But now..." He straightened, his resolve hardening. "Now, there's no going back." A guard appeared at the end of the hall, his silhouette backlit in ominous shadow. Nathan moved like a coiled spring, pulling Cross into an alcove, pressing a finger to his lips as they waited for the guard to pass. Cross's breathing was shallow, nerves fraying with each close call, but he gave Nathan a nod of understanding. They continued, every movement swift, calculated, each corner they rounded bringing them closer to freedom. Finally, as they neared a service door leading out, Cross spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. "I sent that package to my son, Nathan. I didn't just choose anyone. I trust him, I trust that he'll make the right choices where I couldn't. Nathan looked back, his eyes softened by a rare flicker of empathy. He'll know. But first, we get you out of here alive. They reached the last security checkpoint, its alarms dormant but armed with a sensor grid that would set the whole building on high alert. Nathan surveyed it, his mind running through the sequence needed to disarm it without setting off alarms. Stay close and keep quiet. We've got one shot at this. Cross gripped the data drive, his face pale but resolute. I've already risked everything, Nathan. I'm ready. With a series of rapid, practiced motions, Nathan disabled the grid, slipping through with Cross in tow. They slipped into the darkness of an alley just beyond the lab, leaving the cold sterility of Echelon Dynamics behind. Outside, the night was heavy with silence, an oppressive quiet broken only by the faint buzz of distant streetlights. Cross stopped suddenly, turning to face Nathan. Before we go any further, if I don't make it through this, if something happens, promise me you'll tell him. Tell him that everything I did was for him. Nathan's jaw tightened, his gaze unwavering. You'll tell him yourself. Echelon's already taken too much. They're not taking you, too. They shared a look, a fleeting moment of understanding. Cross took a shaky breath, nodding as he let Nathan lead him down the alley. As they reached the rendezvous point, Nathan stopped, signaling for Cross to wait. Someone will be here soon to get you to safety. Trust him, and don't look back. Cross's eyes softened, gratitude and fear mingling in his gaze. Thank you for giving me this chance. Nathan placed a firm hand on Cross's shoulder, his gaze sharp. You're not alone in this anymore. Then he melted into the shadows, his mission complete, leaving Cross alone in the darkness. Ethan soared across Horizon Bay, his quantum guardian armor shimmering as his wings of light carved a trail through the night. The urgency in Nathan's message reverberated in his mind as he flew. This was no ordinary extraction, this was family, though the connection felt as foreign as it was powerful. He landed silently in the alley, wings folding behind him. Dr. Cross stood with his back turned, the soft glow of streetlights casting his silhouette in a ghostly light. Ethan took a breath, his voice carrying the authority of the Quantum Guardian. Are you the lead scientist? I'm here to extract you. Cross turned, his expression wary as he took in the towering figure. Who are you? Ethan's voice held steady, though his heart raced beneath the armor. I'm the Quantum Guardian. I'm here to protect you. A mixture of relief and uncertainty crossed Cross's face as he nodded. So, they sent you. The one they trust. Ethan nodded, stepping forward. Let's get you out of here. Cross stepped into the light, and for the first time, Ethan truly saw his face. Recognition hit him like a punch to the gut, memories flooding back in an instant. His breath caught, the face of the man he'd mourned all these years now just inches away. Barely able to speak, Ethan whispered, "Father." Cross's gaze flickered with familiarity, a faint recognition as he stared at the masked hero before him. Trembling, Ethan reached up, his helmet dematerializing in a shimmer of light, leaving him vulnerable, face to face with the man who had once been his world. Cross's eyes widened, the shock evident as he took in his son's face. Ethan? Is it really you? Ethan's voice cracked, years of pain and anger lacing every word. Yes, it's me. After all these years, you're standing right here. His voice broke. Why? Why did you leave? Cross's face twisted in anguish, reaching out a hesitant hand to touch his son's shoulder. Ethan, I'm so sorry. I never wanted to leave you. When your mother died, I didn't know how to be there. I thought I'd only make things worse. Ethan took a step back, his voice a mixture of rage and hurt. So you abandoned me? You thought I'd be better off alone? He fought back, the tears burning in his eyes. You left me thinking I wasn't enough. Cross looked down, his voice breaking. I thought I was doing the right thing. I see now, I was wrong, Ethan. I was so wrong. Ethan's hands clenched into fists, his anger barely contained. Do you know what it was like growing up alone? Thinking you didn't want me? Cross's eyes filled with tears, his regret clear. Ethan, you were always enough. I was the one who wasn't enough. I was scared, lost without your mother. But I see now that I failed you. And if I could take it back. Ethan's voice softened, the vulnerability cutting through his anger. Then why reach out now? Why risk everything? Cross took a breath, meeting Ethan's gaze. Because I wanted to do something right. I thought of you, the man you must have become. And I knew, it was time. Ethan stared at him, struggling to contain the turmoil of emotions. You don't get to make it up to me with one decision. But if you're willing to stay, to face this together, then maybe we have a chance. Cross nodded, his voice filled with humility and hope. I'll spend the rest of my life making things right if you'll let me. For the first time in years, Ethan allowed himself to let go, to stand side by side with his father. Together, they turned to face the unknown, ready to take on whatever darkness awaited. Ethan turned to his father, a storm of emotions brewing beneath his calm exterior. He drew a steadying breath, then spoke, his tone carrying a quiet strength. Hold on tight. This will be faster. Dr. Cross looked at his son, surprise flickering across his face, quickly replaced by the same hesitation that had marked him all night. But after a brief pause, he nodded, placing his trust in Ethan. Without hesitation, Ethan wrapped a firm arm around his father, pulling him close. With a powerful surge, his wings of light ignited, casting an ethereal glow against the darkened sky. Then, with a mighty leap, they shot upward, slicing through the cool night air. As they ascended, Cross's grip tightened instinctively, his eyes widening as the cityscape fell away beneath them. His initial fear was evident in the way his breath hitched, but as they climbed higher, that nervousness melted into awe. Below, the lights of Horizon Bay sparkled like stars scattered across the earth, the vastness of the city unfolding before them. He glanced sidelong at his son, marveling at the man he'd become, the hero, the guardian, while Ethan flew with an unwavering focus, his wings carving a trail of light through the sky. This was a different kind of silence. This was the weight of years unspoken, of a bond that had been fractured but not fully broken. As they neared quantum core technologies, Ethan tapped his intercom, his voice cutting through the night. Sarah, I'm on approach. I have the lead scientist with me. A moment's pause, then Sarah's voice responded, carrying a mix of relief and intrigue. Copy that. We're ready. Glad to know he's safe. In a fluid descent, Ethan guided them down, landing softly on the rooftop. The glow of the city reflected off Quantum Core's sleek glass facade, casting everything in a muted glow. Standing by the entrance were Sarah and Mister Lennox, both watching as Ethan and his father touched down. Ethan released his hold, stepping back to give his father room to steady himself. Cross exhaled shakily, still visibly processing the flight. Sarah approached, her expression lightening as she looked at Ethan, then shifting to puzzlement when her gaze fell upon Dr. Cross. There was something vaguely familiar in his face, something her intuition picked up but couldn't quite place. Lennox stepped forward, offering his hand to Cross with a calm, reassuring smile. You're safe now, he said, his tone smooth and grounded. Welcome to Quantum Core Technologies. We'll make sure Echelon doesn't find you here. Cross nodded, gripping Lennox's hand in a show of thanks. His gaze, however, was drawn back to Ethan, a complicated mixture of pride, fear, and regret swirling in his eyes. Meanwhile, Sarah pulled Ethan aside, her eyes lingering on Cross as if trying to solve a puzzle. She turned back to Ethan, lowering her voice. Ethan, is that? Her question trailed off, her eyes searching his face for an answer. Ethan took a breath, his voice soft yet steady. Yes. That's my father. Sarah's expression shifted, a wave of understanding and compassion passing over her features. Ethan, I remember you telling me about him, showing me that old photo. Her voice softened, barely a whisper. I thought he was gone. So did I. Ethan's gaze drifted to his father, shadows crossing his face. When he left, it was like he vanished from my life completely. I thought I'd never see him again. His voice tightened, carrying the weight of unhealed wounds. I grew up wondering if it was me. If I'd done something wrong. Sarah placed a gentle hand on his arm, grounding him. And now that he's back, how do you feel? Ethan struggled with the words, his voice a rough edge of emotion. It's a lot. A part of me is angry. Angry that he left, that I spent my whole childhood thinking I wasn't worth staying for. And then, seeing him now, hearing him, he's broken. He lost Mom, lost himself. I get it, but that doesn't make it easy to forgive. He looked away, eyes distant. I thought I'd buried that pain. But it's all back now, stronger than ever. Sarah nodded, her voice gentle yet strong. You don't have to forgive him all at once. It's okay to feel everything, even if it doesn't make sense right now. She searched his face, a hint of determination sparking in her eyes. You've faced down so many battles, Ethan. But this one might be the hardest yet. They stood in shared silence, the gravity of the moment binding them. Finally, Sarah spoke again, a note of curiosity lacing her words. Do you think Nathan knew? Ethan's brow furrowed, considering. Maybe. Nathan's thorough, he might have known and kept it from me, thinking he was protecting me. I'll find out when he gets back. I deserve to know the truth, all of it. Sarah's expression softened, her gaze unwavering. Whatever you find out, Ethan, you won't have to face it alone. I'm here with you. Ethan managed a faint smile, gratitude evident in his gaze. Thanks, Sarah. I couldn't have done any of this without you. Together, they turned back to face Dr. Cross, who stood a few steps away, watching them with a look of trepidation and yearning. This wasn't just a scientist in need of protection, this was the father who had left Ethan as a child, the man Ethan had to confront, not as the boy he'd been but as the hero he'd become. Ethan stood near the edge of the rooftop, his quantum guardian armor still gleaming in the city's light, casting a faint, golden glow. He was standing beside Sarah, who looked at him with quiet encouragement, sensing the importance of what he was about to do. Across the rooftop, Mr. Lennox was speaking quietly with Dr. Cross, the father Ethan had only recently reconnected with after so many years. But this moment, as monumental as it was only part of a larger truth that Ethan had decided he couldn't keep hidden any longer. He turned to Sarah, his voice low, though his words were heavy with meaning. Sarah, I need to tell Mr. Lennox the truth. About me. About the Quantum Guardian. Sarah's eyes widened, her expression shifting to one of surprise, quickly followed by understanding. Are you sure? She asked gently. You've only been the Guardian for a couple of months. That's not a lot of time to get used to carrying this, and it's not something you can ever take back. Ethan nodded, a hint of nervousness in his gaze. I know. But every time I go out there, every time I disappear, it's you who has to explain my absence, lie to him about why I'm gone. You shouldn't have to do that. And Mr. Lennox, he's been there for me through everything. He deserves to know the truth, and I want him to hear it from me. A small smile softened Sarah's face, a flicker of pride evident in her eyes. If you're ready, then I'll be right here for you. But you're right, if anyone deserves to know, it's him. Ethan took a steadying breath, his eyes fixed on Lennox, who was finishing his conversation with Dr. Cross. Just as Lennox turned and began walking toward them, he seemed to notice something, a subtle shift in the Guardian's posture, a sense that something important was coming. Guardian. Lennox greeted with his usual respect, a hint of warmth in his tone. But then his gaze lingered on Ethan, suspicion flickering in his eyes as though he sensed there was more to this meeting. He hesitated, glancing at Dr. Cross before speaking again. I just spoke with Dr. Cross, and he told me he's Ethan's father. He looked back at the Guardian, a faint question in his expression. Do you know where Ethan is? Ethan glanced at Sarah, who gave him an encouraging nod, her quiet support giving him the strength to take the next step. He looked back at Lennox, his heart pounding, the weight of the truth pressing down on him. Mr. Lennox, there's something I need to tell you. He began, his voice steady, though laced with emotion. Something I've kept from you. Lennox's brows furrowed, his gaze sharpening with curiosity as he studied the quantum guardian before him. Ethan took a deep breath, then reached up to the mask of his armor. With a smooth, practiced motion, he deactivated it, the shimmering visor fading away to reveal his face beneath. For a long, silent moment, Lennox's expression shifted from shock to realization, his eyes taking in the familiar features of the young man standing before him. Ethan. He breathed, his voice barely more than a whisper. He blinked, as if struggling to reconcile the face he knew so well with the image of the quantum guardian. You're the guardian. Ethan nodded slowly, holding Lennox's gaze, his heart pounding as the weight of years of friendship and mentorship seemed to hang between them. Yes. He replied softly. It's me. I've been the quantum guardian for 2 months now. Ever since I discovered what I could do, I knew I had to use it, to protect the city, to protect the people I care about. That's where I've been disappearing to, why I couldn't always be there when you needed me. Lennox stared at him, the shock in his eyes fading into something deeper, an understanding laced with pride and sadness. Slowly, he nodded, a faint, bittersweet smile touching his lips. I think I suspected something. He admitted, his voice low and full of emotion. There were times you'd vanish, times you'd come back, different. And when I heard people talk about the quantum guardian, I saw you in those descriptions, but I told myself I'd wait. That I'd let you come to me, in your own time. Ethan felt a surge of gratitude, the weight of his secret finally lifting, though the vulnerability of the moment still left him raw. Thank you, Mr. Lennox. For trusting me, even when you didn't know. And for being patient. Lennox's eyes filled with warmth, his gaze unwavering as he reached out and placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. Ethan, what you're doing, what you've chosen to do, is beyond what most people would even dare. You didn't have to take on this burden, but you did it anyway. And you did it alone, without ever asking for help. Ethan's voice trembled slightly, the weight of the responsibility he'd taken on finally surfacing in the face of Lennox's understanding. It's been hard, Mr. Lennox. I thought I could keep my life separate, thought I could handle it all on my own. But it's harder than I imagined. Lennox's grip on his shoulder tightened, his expression softening as he looked at him with a mixture of pride and compassion. Ethan, you're a hero to this city, but you've always been one to me, even without the armor. His voice grew softer, filled with fatherly pride. And now that I know, I want you to know this, you don't have to face this alone. Not anymore. Whatever you need, whatever help I can give. I'm here. Ethan felt his throat tighten, his eyes burning with unshed tears as he finally allowed himself to feel the support he'd been afraid to ask for. Thank you, Mr. Lennox. He said, his voice thick with emotion. I didn't realize how much I needed this, needed someone to know. Lennox gave a small, reassuring smile, his hand still resting on Ethan's shoulder. You've given up so much to protect this city, Ethan. But now, you don't have to do it alone. I'm proud of you, more than I can put into words. Ethan felt a warmth spread through him, the reassurance filling a void he hadn't known was there. With a steadying breath, he extended his hand, and Lennox clasped it firmly, their handshake a silent promise, a bond that was now stronger than any armor. As they released their grip, Lennox looked at him, his expression softening with an almost fatherly tenderness. You'll always have my support, Ethan. Whatever comes next, we're in this together. The two stood in silence, the weight of their shared understanding heavy yet grounding. For the first time since donning the Quantum Guardian armor, Ethan felt truly seen, truly supported, and he knew that whatever battles lay ahead, he would not face them alone. In the heart of Echelon Dynamics, Leonard Marshall's office was silent, save for the low hum of the city beyond its tinted, floor-to-ceiling windows. Leonard Marshall stood with his hands behind his back, his gaze fixed on the skyline, though his focus was elsewhere. The general, towering and severe, paced nearby, his agitation apparent. "Where is Dr. Cross?" Marshall's tone was edged with an icy authority that masked the tension simmering beneath the surface. "He was supposed to report to us hours ago." The general stopped pacing, his jaw clenched tightly. "We've already contacted his lab," he replied, his voice barely containing his frustration. "His assistant claims Cross left last night, but no one seems to know where he went. It's as if he vanished." Marshall's eyes narrowed, his patience thinning. "That's not acceptable. Dr. Cross wouldn't just disappear. He knows how critical his work is to Genesis." As if on cue, Marshall's office console buzzed to life. He tapped a button, connecting to security. "Sir, we've run a full search," came the voice of the security chief, laced with nervousness. "It appears that Dr. Cross is gone. We've combed through the labs and offices. Some of his research data is missing as well." The tension in the room turned electric, the reality of Cross's disappearance settling over them like a shroud. Marshall's expression darkened, a flicker of anger breaking through his usual composure. "Gone?" His voice was dangerously low. How could he disappear without anyone noticing? The general's face hardened, his tone laced with irritation as he attempted to maintain control. "If Cross is trying to abandon the project or has taken his research to someone else, we'll need to act swiftly. This is a security breach of the highest order." Marshall nodded sharply, his mind racing through the implications. Dr. Cross's expertise was unique. His understanding of Genesis was unmatched. If he's betrayed us, we have a serious problem on our hands. He pressed another button on his console, connecting to Nathan's contact. When Nathan's voice crackled over the line, it was calm, steady, and composed. "Sir, you called?" "Nathan." Marshall's voice was clipped, concealing the underlying frustration. "We have an urgent situation. I need you here. Now." Minutes later, Nathan walked into the office, his posture relaxed yet alert, his gaze shifting between Marshall and the general as he took in the tense atmosphere. He remained silent, allowing the weight of their agitation to hang before either of them spoke. Marshall wasted no time. "Dr. Cross is gone," he said flatly, his eyes narrowing as he studied Nathan's reaction. "He disappeared along with a significant amount of research data related to Project Genesis." Nathan's face remained impassive, though he allowed a flicker of annoyance to pass over his expression, just enough to seem frustrated. "Dr. Cross?" he asked, his tone carrying a hint of disbelief. "I thought he was under constant surveillance, with his movements monitored. Shouldn't this have been flagged before he had the chance to vanish?" The general's face tightened, but he answered curtly. "It seems Cross managed to evade detection. A mistake on our security's part, but he won't get far. He can't hide for long." Nathan's gaze drifted between the two men, his expression shifting into one of thinly veiled irritation. "With all due respect, Dr. Cross has been under pressure for weeks. It's possible that this disappearance is the result of that pressure. Maybe if he'd had more support, fewer pressing demands, he wouldn't be in a position to disappear." His tone was casual, but the implication lingered, a subtle accusation veiled in loyalty. Marshall's eyes narrowed at Nathan's words, but he seemed to accept them, as if he were too consumed by the problem at hand to question Nathan's implication. "Your opinion is noted. But this is beyond speculation now, Nathan. Cross has the knowledge and resources to hinder us in significant ways if he's turned against us." Nathan let a slight edge seep into his tone. "If you're asking me to track down Cross, I can tell you now that this will take time. And his disappearance, especially with critical research missing, suggests that he's had help. If you want him back, I'll need access to every resource, every lead, and an understanding of the full extent of his work on Genesis. I'll need to know exactly what we're dealing with. The general gave a small, approving nod, his impatience softening as he seemed to appreciate Nathan's straightforward approach. Good. We'll provide whatever you need, Nathan. Dr. Cross's research cannot fall into the wrong hands, and we'll support your efforts to bring him back. Project Genesis is too far along to abandon now. Marshall's gaze turned icy, the calculating gleam returning as he looked at Nathan. I want answers, Nathan, and I don't want this slipping out. Find Dr. Cross. Quietly. We don't need unnecessary attention or questions. Cross may have been our best mind on Genesis, but he's not irreplaceable. Not to me. Nathan gave a slow nod, masking the contempt he felt brewing under the surface. Understood, sir. I'll make sure there are no loose ends. He paused, adding a hint of reproach in his tone, just enough to remain ambiguous. But Dr. Cross's absence is a direct threat to Project Genesis. Without him, we risk gaps in the development that could cost us valuable time. Marshall's face tightened, the corners of his mouth pressing into a thin line. We will not delay Genesis, he said, his voice sharp with finality. If Cross is beyond our reach, we'll find others to pick up where he left off. But until we know for certain, we need him back, and I'm trusting you to bring him in. Nathan held Marshall's gaze, a faint glint of something unreadable in his eyes. I'll get it done, he replied evenly. I'll start with every contact, every possible lead. If Dr. Cross has left a trail, I'll find it. Marshall's expression remained cold, but he seemed to relax slightly, reassured by Nathan's confidence. See that you do. Report back with any findings, immediately. Nathan inclined his head, a subtle, unspoken acknowledgement, before turning and walking out of the office. He could feel their eyes on him as he left, each of them likely analyzing his every word, every reaction. But he kept his pace steady, his expression hard, every bit the loyal asset they believed him to be. The moment the doors closed behind him, Nathan's expression shifted, a slight sneer of disgust breaking through as he made his way down the corridor. The game he was playing was becoming more dangerous with every passing moment, but he was resolved. Marshall and the general believed they controlled everyone around them, that they could manipulate and dispose of people like chess pieces. But Nathan knew their weaknesses now, their arrogance and their blind ambition. And he intended to use it against them. For now, he'd maintain the act, continue to play the part of their loyal soldier. But beneath the surface, his real mission was clear: expose Marshall's plans, protect Ethan and Dr. Cross, and bring down Echelon Dynamics from the inside. As he walked, he mentally prepared his next steps. Every move from here on out had to be flawless. The stakes had risen, and he knew that one wrong step could cost him everything. But Nathan was ready, his purpose sharpened with a deadly resolve. Nathan made his way to quantum core technologies under the cover of night, the cool air carrying a faint edge of tension that seemed to seep into everything around him. Inside, the halls were quiet, the building's lights dimmed to a soft glow as most of the staff had left for the night. Nathan moved with practiced ease, bypassing the few security checkpoints with authorization codes that had been discreetly arranged for him. Tonight, he wasn't here on Echelon's business, he was here to update Ethan and Sarah on what had just gone down with Marshall and the general. When he reached the private conference room where Sarah and Ethan were waiting, he found them seated side by side, their postures tense as they looked up at him. Ethan, still in his quantum guardian armor with the mask removed, had an intensity in his gaze that Nathan had come to respect. Sarah was just as focused, her eyes sharp, always ready to dissect the latest piece of information. Nathan closed the door behind him, letting out a breath. They know Dr. Cross is gone, he began, his voice low but firm, cutting straight to the heart of the matter. And it's worse than we thought. Marshall and the general found out he took a portion of the Project Genesis data with him. They're calling it a major security breach. Ethan's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing. What did they say? Nathan pulled out a chair and sank into it, leaning forward as he relayed the events from Marshall's office. Marshall's furious, but he's also focused. He's already instructed security to lock down the facility, but it's too late. He's got no clue where Dr. Cross went. His assumption is that your father had help and that he's working against Echelon now. Sarah glanced between them, her expression darkening. And the general? The general's just as angry, but his concern is with Genesis. Without Cross, the project's development is effectively stalled. They're scrambling to figure out their next move, but they won't stop. They'll push forward with or without him, and that's why they sent me to find him, to bring him back, preferably without anyone noticing he was even gone. Ethan let out a slow breath, his gaze intense as he absorbed Nathan's words. So they're assuming he betrayed them, or that he's gone rogue? Nathan nodded. Exactly. They think he's either working against them or planning to sell his research to someone else. They don't suspect that he's with you, at least not yet. But they know something's up, and they won't let this slide. Marshall and the general are on edge, and they're determined to get him back, one way or another. Sarah crossed her arms, her face hardening with anger. They don't care about the man, just the data he took with him. Nathan's gaze shifted to her, his voice edged with bitterness. They see him as a tool, nothing more. The fact that he's your father, Ethan, means nothing to them. To them, he's disposable, and they'll replace him if they have to. Ethan's fists clenched, the anger in his eyes tempered by the determination that had driven him since he'd become the Quantum Guardian. But they don't know what they're dealing with. He said, his tone steely. My father may have his regrets, but he's not a traitor. He left because he knew the danger Genesis posed, and he wouldn't just hand over that kind of power to anyone. Nathan leaned back, a small, approving nod in Ethan's direction. Exactly. But they don't see it that way. To Marshall and the general, it's just a matter of control. They believe they can take Genesis and weaponize it, use it to reshape reality itself. They've blinded themselves to the risks. Sarah met Nathan's gaze, her voice soft but fierce. So what now? They'll come looking for Dr. Cross, and when they can't find him, they'll get desperate. They'll push harder, search wider. Nathan gave a slow nod, his voice steady. That's the plan, Sarah. They're calling it a quiet operation, but we all know what that means. If they can't get him back willingly, they'll resort to less subtle methods. They won't care who gets in the way. Ethan exhaled sharply, his expression pained yet resolute. And they sent you after him, didn't they? Nathan's eyes held a glimmer of something unreadable, regret, perhaps, or frustration. Yes. They think I'll track him down and bring him back in line. They still think I'm on their side, that I'm their loyal asset. But that gives us an edge. As long as they don't suspect, I can keep feeding them just enough to stay in their good graces while protecting Cross and the information he has. Ethan held Nathan's gaze, the tension between them unspoken but heavy. There was a question hovering in the air, one he knew he had to ask. Nathan, did you know? That Dr. Cross was my father? Nathan looked away for a moment, his expression flickering with something complicated. When he turned back, his gaze was steady. Yes. He admitted quietly. I knew. I figured it out a while back. When I started working with Echelon, I saw his file, and then I saw you. Ethan's jaw clenched, but he held Nathan's gaze, waiting for him to continue. I didn't tell you because, at first, I wasn't sure what to make of it. Nathan explained, his voice rough with unspoken emotion. You were already dealing with so much, and this was big. I didn't want to throw that at you without knowing what it meant. And then, as things with Echelon got darker, I realized that telling you could put you in more danger. They're ruthless, Ethan. If they knew who you were, who your father was, they'd use it against you without a second thought. Ethan nodded slowly, a look of understanding crossing his face. I get it, Nathan. It couldn't have been easy for you to keep that to yourself. Nathan's expression softened, a hint of regret evident. I wanted to tell you. Every time we talked about Cross or Genesis, I wanted to tell you who he was to you. But I kept thinking of what could happen if Marshall or the General found out, if they caught wind of your connection. I figured it was safer to keep it buried until the time was right. Sarah placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder, her gaze filled with quiet empathy. Nathan did what he thought was best, Ethan. And he was right. If Marshall had known, we wouldn't be standing here now, talking about this. Ethan took a deep breath, the anger he'd felt melting into a mixture of gratitude and relief. Thank you, Nathan. For looking out for me. I know you're risking everything being here, being on our side. Nathan gave a small, almost sad smile. We're all risking everything now, Ethan. But you and Cross, you're worth it. You're both fighting for something bigger than yourselves. I saw that the first time I realized what you were doing as the Guardian, and I knew that this fight, our fight, it was worth the risk. Ethan's expression softened, a look of respect and gratitude filling his eyes. Then let's make sure we see this through, together. No more secrets between us. Nathan nodded, a sense of solidarity binding the three of them in a silent promise. He held out his hand, and Ethan took it, clasping it tightly as they exchanged a look of understanding. Sarah joined in, placing her hand over theirs, a quiet affirmation that they were united in purpose, bound by trust. The three stood together, aware that the road ahead was dangerous, that the secrets they held could bring destruction if mishandled. But together, they felt stronger, more determined than ever to face whatever Marshall and the General threw their way. Nathan left the conference room quietly, his steps echoing in the empty hallways of quantum core technologies. The weight of the night's conversations sat heavily on his shoulders, a strange mix of relief and tension filling his chest. He had made it through another day, another test, another step closer to freeing himself from Echelon Dynamics and everything it represented. Nathan stood alone on the rooftop of Quantum Core Technologies, the city sprawling out below him in all its late-night brilliance. The events of the day played over and over in his mind, leaving him feeling both weary and strangely renewed. He'd spent so much of his life in the shadows, navigating webs of deception and betrayal, and now, he was on the brink of something entirely different, a purpose that felt clear, grounded, and right. As he stared out over the city, a gentle voice, both serene and commanding, broke the silence. You've come a long way, Nathan. He turned, startled to see a woman standing quietly just a few feet away, her presence so calm it seemed to harmonize with the night itself. She was tall and graceful, with an ageless beauty and a look of deep wisdom that struck him immediately. Her eyes held his with a piercing clarity that felt like she could see straight into his soul. Who are you? Nathan asked, his voice low, the surprise evident in his tone. He felt an odd sense of familiarity, a connection he couldn't place. She offered him a gentle smile, stepping forward so that the glow of the city lights cast a soft halo around her. I am called Aurelia, she said, her voice warm and strong. I am a guardian, one of an ancient order, tasked with protecting the balance of this world. She paused, a knowing look in her eyes. And I am here because of Ethan, and now, because of you. Nathan studied her, his brow furrowing as he tried to piece together what she meant. So, you're here to watch over him? You know about the Quantum Guardian? Aurelia nodded, her expression softening. Yes, I know of his role, his strength. Ethan holds a rare spirit, a light that this world desperately needs, even though he's still learning his path. She glanced out over the city, her gaze distant, thoughtful. But it's more than that. I see in him a reminder of someone I once loved deeply, a son I lost long ago to a war I could not stop, despite all the powers I possessed. Nathan felt a pang of empathy, his own struggles and regrets suddenly feeling smaller in comparison. A son, so that's why you protect him? Her gaze returned to his, her eyes filled with sadness and pride in equal measure. Yes. My son was taken from me, and I carry that loss with me every day. Ethan carries the same courage, the same strength my son once did. In a way, he has given me a new purpose, a new reason to protect this world. She hesitated, a small sigh escaping her. I once left my order, choosing to live among humans, hoping to learn from them, to feel their joys and sorrows. But I learned that the cost of that choice was vulnerability, a cost that I paid dearly. Nathan looked down, absorbing her words. It sounds lonely. He murmured, a strange sense of understanding passing between them. I know what it's like to lose people, to feel like every choice you make is haunted by what you couldn't save. Aurelia's expression softened, a flicker of compassion in her gaze. I see that in you, Nathan. You are carrying a weight, a past that binds you, though you are working to be free of it. She reached out, placing a gentle hand on his arm. You're changing, Nathan. I see someone who is ready to leave the shadows behind. He looked away, her words cutting through him. I've spent my whole life fighting in the dark, doing things I'm not proud of, becoming something I don't recognize. But lately, I don't want that anymore. I want to be someone better. Aurelia's smile grew warmer, her voice soft but steady. You're no longer that person, Nathan. You've chosen a new path, one of redemption and purpose. You're fighting for something greater than yourself, for the lives of others, and for the light that still exists within you. She paused, her gaze unwavering. Shadow Strike, that name no longer belongs to you. It is a shadow of your past, not the man you're becoming. Nathan's brow furrowed, her words resonating deeply. Then, who am I supposed to be? He asked, a mixture of hope and uncertainty in his voice. Aurelia's eyes sparkled with a quiet pride as she spoke. From this moment forward, you will be known as Nightfall. She said, her voice filled with purpose. You are no longer just a shadow in the night, but a protector, a guardian as night falls upon the city. You stand between the darkness and those who cannot defend themselves. Nightfall, the one who guards the night. Nathan repeated the name quietly, letting it sink in. Nightfall. He looked at her, something shifting within him. It feels right. He admitted, the name fitting him in a way that Shadow Strike never had. But why Nightfall? She smiled, her gaze filled with warmth and understanding. Because Nightfall isn't just an ending, it's a beginning. The moment when light fades and darkness descends, and it is then, in the shadows, that protectors like you stand watch. You may not be perfect, and your past may haunt you, but you've chosen to protect others. That is what makes you worthy of this name. Nathan felt a surge of humility and resolve, her words grounding him. Thank you, Aurelia. He said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. For everything. I don't know if I'll ever deserve this, but I'll do everything I can to be the man you believe I can be. She placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch filled with a quiet strength. You already are, Nathan. You've chosen the path, and I see that you will walk it with courage and honor. Nightfall is more than a name, it's a promise. To yourself and to everyone who needs you. They stood in silence, the weight of her words settling over him. Nathan felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years, a clarity that felt as though a veil had been lifted. He was no longer burdened by the darkness he'd carried, he was stepping into a new purpose, a new name, and a new path. Aurelia's voice softened as she looked back toward the city. Remember, Nightfall, you are not alone. Even in the deepest night, there are stars to guide you. Trust those who stand beside you, and know that you are stronger together. Nathan nodded, a quiet strength filling him. I won't forget. He promised, a newfound conviction in his voice. And I won't let Ethan or anyone else down. Not now, not ever. With a final, gentle smile, Aurelia gave him a nod, her gaze filled with pride. Good. You have everything you need within you, Nathan. Trust yourself. As she turned and slipped back into the shadows, disappearing as mysteriously as she had appeared, Nathan remained on the rooftop, a sense of peace washing over him. He looked out over the city once more, his gaze steady, no longer burdened by his past. From now on, he would be Nightfall, the guardian of the night. With this new name and purpose, he felt ready to face whatever lay ahead, not as Shadow Strike, but as a protector, a force of light even within the darkness.